But we're dealing with here, we're talking about logic's end, we're talking with Keith Robinson, we're talking about evolution versus creationism. I thank God that we still live in a country where we can examine the issues. It's great. Moving on, Keith, here at the end of your book you provide quotes, statistics, theistic evolution. Could you define for us what your opinion is about that?
Well, as you said, I could, briefly is the key point. And maybe I'll have to come back some other time because this topic is just, there's so much, there's so much you could talk about. When it comes to the theory of evolution, one of the things I like to get across to people is the difference between, I've heard so many people say, well, evolution is about science and creation is about religion. But you know what, when it comes down to it, it's really not the case. What the case is, excuse me, is it's about two different interpretations of the same science. In the briefest nutshell, let me explain that there's a difference between operational science and origin science. Operational science is the kind of science that gives us the cameras that I'm looking into right now and that we're doing this show on. It gives us the computers. It gives us the technology to send a man to the moon and to orbit the planet and things like that. But origin science is the science where you look at the evidence around you and you try to reconstruct what happened for a past event. So there's a big difference there. It's kind of like forensic science, or detectives do that kind of thing where they look at the scene, the murder scene, and they try to reconstruct what happened based upon the evidence that they see around them. But interpretation is a huge part of that. Yes, there's some observational science that you can repeat in a laboratory, such as they take the DNA sample or they take the blood and they do that kind of thing if you're trying to recreate a crime scene. And there is some of that in origin science, but the vast majority of it is based upon an interpretation of the evidence. And so when it comes to these kind of issues, I like to point that out, that it's not religion versus science. It really is two different interpretations of the same science. Now, with that being said, in the back of my book, yes, it is a novel, it is fiction, but I do weave some real science throughout the novel, and I really try to explain that in the back of the book to show that this is not just fiction. It is based on real science. And so, in the briefest of time, again, I'll try to lay out the 4 points that I present in the back of the book, and I will say that I do take these 4 points and expound upon them in an entire presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that I do give if anyone is interested in having me come and give that presentation. So it's an hour, 45 minutes to an hour-long presentation. I'm going to summarize it in about 4 minutes. I'll do my best. But the first one is biological information. When you look at DNA and the amount of information contained in DNA, the scientists have estimated that it would fill 1,000 books of about 500 pages each. Now, we're not talking about just repetition information. We're talking about a constant stream of information that would fill 1,000 books. Now, you take that information and you look at what we observe. Again, observable science, what we observe around us, and there has never been observed in the natural world any kind of structure, any kind of thing that can create a code system. And yet we observe a code system in DNA. In fact, it is the most amazing storage system in the entire known universe, according to scientists. And yet people want to say that it came about by chance, yet we've never observed a code system come about by chance. For example, a CD would be useless without the computer to read the CD, or without the CD player to read the music that's on the CD. There's a code system that the CD has been burned, that has been burned into the CD that contains the information. If I give you something that's in Chinese and you don't speak Chinese, then that doesn't do you any good. That information is useless. So that's the first point, biological information. The second point is called irreducible complexity, and this was created by Michael Behe in his book Darwin's Black Box. And in that book, he talks about the fact that the simplest example that I can give you is you take a car and you can take away the windshield wipers and you can take away the headlights and all these different things until you're left with bare bones. It's irreducible. You cannot take away the steering wheel. If you do, you're going to crash. You cannot take away the tires. If you do, you won't be able to roll. You cannot take away the power source, the battery, or the wires that connect everything. You just can't take away anything else or it will not function. And we observe that in the natural world, in biological machines. You cannot take away anything from these biological machines or they won't function because of the complexities of a cell. They've estimated that a single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. Now, I'm an amateur mechanic, and I can tell you that there are so many little things that can go wrong with a car, and it will not function. So therefore, how do you build a car, let's say, one piece at a time? What good would a tire do you, or one spark plug do you? Or what good would a steering wheel without the attachment that connects it to the tires? That's irreducible complexity. So you have biological information, irreducible complexity, and the third is mathematical probability. Because of the complexity of a cell, they have done mathematical research and come out that the chance of life arising just by random chances would be 10 followed by 40,000 zeros. Now, to put that in a little bit of perspective, because that number is so huge we cannot comprehend it, they have estimated that the number of atoms in the universe is 10 followed by 80 zeros. 40,000 zeros and 80 zeros. And then mathematics has determined that any number, any probable chance that is greater than 10 to the 50th power is not only improbable, but is impossible. It can never happen. 10 to the 50th power can never happen, and yet they estimate the chance of life arising by natural chances is 10 to the 40,000th power, or 40,000th power. So that's the third one. And the last one is random mutations. We have never observed in our natural world a mutation that can add genetic information to the genetic code. So again, you've got a human that has 1,000 books of 500 pages each, and then you have a microbe or a early life form, a single-celled creature, a bacteria, that has one book of 500 pages. So how do you get from one book to 1,000 books? Where did all that information come from? We have never observed a mutation adding genetic information. For an example, you'll never see a dog born with wings because a dog does not have the genetic information to create wings. Now, I've seen a two-headed turtle in Florida when I visited there. I saw in Ripley's Believe It or Not a man who had an extra foot sticking out from his ankle. I've seen a picture of a chicken with an extra leg. But the thing is, all of those structures, those extra structures, the creature already, or the human already had the information to create those structures. It just created an extra one and put it in the wrong place. We've never observed a new structure being created by mutations. So those are the 4 key points.
I just take